Welcome to She Sells Radio. Have you ever been curious to learn the mindset of an eight-figure entrepreneur? Well, if you have, you're going to want to listen into today's interview with my client and award-winning entrepreneur, Julie Ellis. So if you are not familiar with Julie, you are probably familiar with her company, one of her companies that she has founded if you are a parent. So Julie is an author, she's a professional speaker, and she's a leadership coach to corporate leaders and scaling entrepreneurs. She is the co-founder of the company Mabel's Labels, which I did not understand the necessity of labeling everything until I started sending two little kids to daycare and realizing that everything has to be labeled. And the concept behind her company is absolutely brilliant. So I have so much appreciation for it now as a mom. She's the author of the book Big Gorgeous Goals, which is written for women entrepreneurs who want to step out of the small box they find themselves in and set world domination in their sights. And we're going to have a really powerful conversation today because Julie sold her company, and I think it was 2016. Right, Julie, so sold your company, Mabel's Labels, in 2016, has gone on to form a coaching company that empowers entrepreneurs and leaders to scale from 7 to 8 figures. So I know there's so many places I want to go with this conversation. Julie, welcome to She Sells Radio. I'm so glad to have you.
Thanks, Elise. I'm so glad to be here.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think we are I want to touch on a couple of different things with you, Julie, that I think are really powerful. It is just because of the rarity of building and scaling an 8-figure business. It's such a great opportunity that we can have you on here to talk about your journey there, what you did, selling to Avery Labels. I'm really curious to hear about that. And then also we'll talk about, your book that you've written, Big Gorgeous Goals, and the mindset and some of the commonalities that you see with other women leaders like you who have done really big things in the business world. But before we get into all of that, I want to share just some of your backstory with our listeners. So you have this incredibly inspiring story of creating one of Canada's greatest business success stories, Mabel's Labels, which you did build to 8 figures with your co-founders, and then sold to Avery Labels, which everyone knows that name, in 2016. Now, I am guessing, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing you did not anticipate this necessarily being your life path when you first got started in business and entrepreneurship. So if it was, tell us, but otherwise tell us a little bit of the journey and how you got started and what led you to this big entrepreneurial moment that most people never experience.
Well, I was working as a financial planner. So I had, finished university, worked my way through a couple of management programs, and ended up as a financial planner, managing a book of clients. And I knew that if I wanted to continue to climb the corporate ladder, it meant, getting on a commuter train to the city and all of those things. And I had small kids at the time and didn't really feel like it fit my life plan. And so when a couple of friends of mine and I got together to think about starting a business, that kind of felt like it landed with me. I felt like I wanted more flexibility and I wanted to be the owner of my own destiny, I think, at that point in my life. And so we got started. And we basically, had a very limited budget, and we made up a list of all the people we knew. And then we had to cut some of them off the list because we didn't have enough money to send them all our welcome letter. And we sat and stuffed envelopes and put stamps on them and addressed them with those letters to launch our business. And we opened a bottle of champagne and we toasted to the IPO we would have one day.
Really?
Yes, we did.
So you started with the intention of that's beautiful. Okay. I love that. Yeah,
we did. And so, then we went back to our teeny tiny little basement office and started making labels. And we quickly gained a following. And we, from a very early point in the business, felt like if we could get some coverage by media, that would help us. And so we started.
I want to pause you. Excuse me, super quick, Julie. I just want to pause you really quick. How did you quickly gain a following? Because this was in early 2000s.
Early 2000s, right? Yeah. So pre-social media. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we were taking our kids places and standing at the soccer field and the gymnastics club and the daycare, where they said, please label everything.
Wow.
And we were talking to moms, and moms share products that they like. And our products were visible products because you were putting them on the things that your kids were taking out into the world. And so
Mm.
we just chatted with people. And from there, we really started to make sales.
Got it. So very
Yeah,
grassroots. I think it's just so
it
powerful because
was.
we've got listeners who are at all different stages of their journey. And so to hear, you built an 8-figure business from grassroots, talking, talking to people is so before the
Absolutely.
age of social media. So thank you for
Hmm.
clarifying that. So you did that. And then you said, okay, we want to get some media and some press to help
Yeah.
elevate this. So pick up
Yeah.
where you left off there.
Yeah. And we got a tiny, tiny little write up on a parenting roundup page in a magazine in Canada, like literally like 1.5 by 2.5 inches. And it led to us being named the Daily Candy, which was this subscriber newsletter. And once a week, they would say what the Daily Candy was for kids. So the Daily Candy
Hmm.
kids came out and they said, you must have Mabel's labels. So it went to all of their thousands of subscribers. And suddenly we had all these orders coming in.
Wow.
And near the end of the day, somebody phoned us and said, so have you had a busy day today? And my sister-in-law said, yes. What's like, well, how do you know? And she said, well, I submitted you. And so she had gotten
Um,
the magazine. She lived in California. Her cousin in Ottawa, Canada, sent her the magazine, and she submitted us because she thought it was so cool.
wow.
And that event led to that one of the customers who bought labels from us that day was Elizabeth Hasselbeck.
Hmm.
And about a year after that, we came back to the office on a Tuesday after it had been a holiday Monday here. And we had a message on our voicemail saying that they were having a baby shower for her on The View. And would we be interested in having the labels featured in that segment?
Wow.
And yeah, and that led, very quickly to this baby shower episode about 10 days later. And there were about 10 products. And she went along the line and she stood with a cup that had a Mabel's label on it and said, I could not live without these.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Oh.
that led to, the biggest 24 hours of sales we'd ever had.
Oh my gosh. I know you'll keep sharing, but there's this beautiful kind of theme emerging as you talk, Julie, that I want to hear your perspective on briefly of the kind of the dual forces of both taking action with what you can right in the moment, right? You got started and you said, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go grassroots. We're going to go talk to moms.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there was no way you could have predicted the opportunity with The View or with Elizabeth Hasselbeck and seeing there's like this dance that I found in my own journey of both taking the best action we possibly can at the moment with what we have. And then also knowing that when we do that and when we have that powerful intention, like you said, with the champagne toast, we're toasting to our IPO, there will be synchronicities, there will be serendipities. And I just, it's sad to me that comes through so powerfully when you share. So if you want to share anything on that energy of creation, I just think that's so powerful to hear.
Yeah, I think we did have that energy of why can't we do it? Like that, people would say,
Yeah.
well, you can't do that. And we'd say, why not? And so
Mm,
then we would go and find a way to do it. We didn't
yeah.
really listen to the you can'ts. And I think that we were very determined to create a product that, number one, actually did what we said it did.
Mm,
And, I meet people today who are like, those things won't come off. They're still stuck on. And that's what we actually wanted. And,
mm,
we had a no questions asked money back guarantee. We did all of these things to really stand behind the product that we offered. And
mm.
so the combination, I think, of this like high intention setting and also like standing by what we were doing came together in a really beautiful way for us.
Wow. Wow. That's so powerful. So take us, okay, so let's take us from The View then. So you said most orders ever in 24 hours from that, right? And then take us to the point where Avery came in and wanted to
Yeah.
purchase and yeah.
So we continued really from there, innovating and growing and, growing our team. We opened a retail line of products that we sold in Target in the US and Walmart in Canada. And we just kept innovating as we went and thought of new fun ideas and continued to sort of push that envelope. And I think particularly probably our presence at retail really drew the eyes of Avery Labels, because when they called us, they said they'd been watching us for years, which was super interesting because, we were very intimidated when we went into retail and we went up against them. But the thing we brought was, we brought the moms who knew our brand and wanted to buy a product they could have on the fly, right? They didn't want to wait for a custom printed, shipped by mail product to come to their mailbox all the time. They could wait sometimes, but sometimes they needed a quick solution and they needed it right away.
Right.
So I think that really, helped elevate. And we were doing well in terms of our sales in retail outlets.
Yeah.
So we one day got a phone call and just, asked if we could speak with them. And they asked if we had ever thought about selling the business. And I think one of the crossroads you hit as you get to 8 figures is that getting to, mid 8 figures and up towards 9 figures is another huge climb and another hard road. And after the founders had been together, we'd been together for about 12 years. And I think, we all were in slightly different places about what we wanted for the future. And I think that happens. It's a totally normal thing. And, you start together on a path and ever so slightly, people's dreams and wants and needs start to just do this a little bit. But by the time you get many years down the road, they start to widen even farther. And so their call really came at a time when we were contemplating how we wanted to run the future business. And so it really made sense to talk to them, at least, and hear what they had to say.
Yeah. I think that's a great, and that's like with any relationship, right? That's going to happen, whether it's a co-founder, it can be with our romantic relationships, with friendships, and just tuning into, based on how we've grown and evolved, what's the best and highest path to take next. So, yeah. And so with the sale, if there's anything that you want to share from that, I'd love to hear, because I think probably for most of our listeners, they haven't been through something like that yet. So if there's anything you want to pull out that you think looking back, it's like, wow, that would have been really good to know, or I learned this big lesson from that, would love to hear that.
Yeah. Best and highest path with our shareholder hats on was definitely, looking at the acquisition. But it is a very hard road of its own. Due diligence is filled with like detailed work and gathering of 1 million documents. And, I ran around with my 20-page spreadsheet that had, between 6 and 12 points on each page of things I needed to gather. And so I sort of was the point person for that. I had help with the gathering from my other co-founders. And then we had one co-founder who was sort of facing the negotiation side. So we did a real divvy up the work and try and get as far as we could, but it was a lot of work and it was a race. Like, we sold very quickly in about 5 months, which is unbelievable, really. I think we're fortunate because we ran a business that had good systems and processes. So I say it was a lot of work, but we came from a good baseline.
Yeah.
And it's wildly distracting to sell your business. It's wildly distracting from focusing on growing your business. And so we, landed at the finish line somewhat exhausted, and literally by day 1, the requests for, we need you to, produce this, change this, forecast this, like, started to fly in, and we realized, there wasn't going to be a break. It was sort of we thought we had reached a finish line, but really it was a start line.
Wow. How much longer did that continue after that point?
It took a while. And because, the parent company of Avery is a publicly traded company, so the reporting requirements are high and they're fast. you know? And so for a small finance team you're an 8-figure business, great, but you get bought by a, $5 billion printing company and the requirements are high. And so like adjusting to some of those things and making the changes was definitely a challenge that we met and we did, but it took a lot of effort, more than we expected. And that for me is where I think things really started to change in terms of what my trajectory was going to look like.
Right. Absolutely. Which I want to come back to. I want to ask before we do, what was the mindset that you had to have, Julie, in those times where it's like, gosh, this is okay. It's a lot of work. I know where I'm going. I feel like I see the finish line, but it could feel overwhelming, or it can feel, I would imagine there's a fair amount of resilience that had to be developed during the process. So what was the mindset that you developed that allowed you to navigate through this whole big transition as smoothly as you did?
Head down, one foot in front of the other, keep going. I had people I talked to every day. The accountant, the lawyer, and our operational advisor. Every morning, I would sort of start out by talking to all three of those people about where we were at, what everybody was thinking, what were the next steps, where was I stuck anywhere, and did I need any help? And that rhythm sort of ran my life for about 4 months.
So presence, one step at a time, stay focused, which is a powerful mindset for anyone to have. So talk to us about the transition from there. So you got some clarity. Okay, maybe I'm going in a different path after this all came together.
I did. I got some clarity that the path that I thought I was on wasn't going to be the path that I wanted to be on. And that was sort of revelation to me. Like I was going to be one of those founders who, stayed forever, went back and visited the office after retirement and took over a boardroom and, drank coffee and chatted with the staff and that sort of thing. And, instead what happened was after 6 months, I did leave. And I think, part of that head down, one foot in front of the other, let's get this done attitude allowed me to be somewhat unemotional, which was useful at that time, but in the after part of the sale might not have been that useful to me because I hadn't contemplated really what I would do. And so I sort of was trying to cast a few different opportunities and options about where I thought I could be really useful to the business. But ultimately, it seemed like what I wanted and what was going to be available because not being an owner, not being like giving away, taking off your owner hat and the responsibilities that goes with that, sort of left me feeling like it was the part of the business I liked the best. That's what and so I was sad that part had sort of gone away from being within my control.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I was just talking before this interview with a client of just navigating endings and how we always look back and we can say, gosh, like I'm so glad that happened, right? I can't think of an ending in my life as hard as probably most of them have felt at the time, especially when I was less conscious about what's going on. Can't think of an ending where I didn't look back and say, I see exactly how that was teeing me up for what's next. But in the moment, it feels crappy.
Yes.
Often, right?
Well,
a lot of words we could choose, but
and I think there's something about entrepreneurs where we're highly driven people who believe in ourselves and we like to climb for pinnacles and we very rarely, like I think about my experience at Mabel's Labels, and I mean we won some amazing awards, we had some amazing things happen, and our reaction would often be, well, okay, but we didn't actually sell as much as we wanted to, or we didn't actually get this. We didn't it was a little bit like we couldn't revel in it because we felt we had more work to do. And I think there's a lesson in that about appreciating what happens on the journey a little bit more. But I think it also created a scenario for me where when I hit the very natural plateau of selling the business and then deciding to leave, I struggled because that wasn't what you did. You didn't really sit on plateaus.
Right, right. How long was the transition period from when you left until obviously now you're doing incredible work, coaching and consulting, helping founders scale to 8 figures, and you've written your book, Big Gorgeous Goals. But how long was that transition? Kind of almost like that. I call it a lot of times the no man's land or the no woman's land, that in between period.
So I was off for just over a year and
Mhm.
then doing a little bit of consulting and work. And then I went and landed a gig working for somebody else and running
Mm,
their business. And so there it was really interesting. I had about 135 people that were reporting to me, and I reported to the owner who wanted to step out of the day to day. And it was an amazing experience, great business, great team. And at the end, as I started to get to the 18-month mark, I was kind of like, something's happening for me here. And I think it's that I don't want to work for somebody else. And it
okay.
really took me getting to that second point of working for somebody else where I was like, wait a second, I want to go build something for me.
Yeah.
And so in early 2019, that's when I started this phase of the journey that I'm on now. So it took me sort of 2.5 years after leaving Mabel's
Yeah.
to really find the path.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. And that clarity is so important. And I
Yeah.
think for those of us who I don't know about you. I personally don't think everyone is wired to be an entrepreneur. I think there's different paths for different people, but if you are wired that way, it feels, you did not say this word. It can feel crippling or boxed in to be
Mhm.
working for somebody else, which I know is actually, it's something I want to ask you about your book, Big Gorgeous Goals, that you wrote, because I know you talk about helping women get out of this small box that we find ourselves in. So I think what will be really fun is let's talk a little bit about some of the concepts from Big Gorgeous Goals, and then we'll tie it into scaling and building from 7 to 8 figures. But when I read that, I was like, okay, I can relate to that. I can think of so many times in my life when I felt like I found myself in a small box. I'm guessing most people can, but what is this box and how do we even find ourselves in it? Why don't we start there?
Well, I think the box is, the limits that we put on ourselves. Ultimately, that's what builds the box, right? And so what happens when we think about doing something really big is one of the first things we feel is fear. And
Mhm.
that sort of sets your foundation. If you're on a foundation of fear, what you do is you hide behind things. So you hide behind your busyness, you hide behind your to-do lists, you hide behind the things that, bring you some amount of comfort and some amount of, well, I'm just so busy that I don't have time to actually go after that, right? Because it's convenient to feel that you don't have to be in that afraid zone or that unsteady zone where we get to when we start getting into a growth phase. And
Yeah,
so
I
that
want to,
really, go
yeah, if I could
ahead.
I just want to pull out something you said. It's so important. I'm like, I want to write this down. The foundation of, to me, this is such a key, and it's a tell if you're in fear or not. Are you hiding behind the busyness? Are you hiding behind the to-do list? And I notice in my own life, I know those have tended to crop up more and feel like more and more when I'm in a transition time, that maybe the
Yeah.
next phase feels scary or feels uncomfortable. So I just want to like make sure everybody got that, because I think we would not even be aware that that was what was going on. We
Mhm,
would say, oh, I'm just busy. And
mhm,
you're like, no, like, are you on
mhm,
a foundation of fear right now? So
mhm.
thank you. Keep going. But I think that's
It's
so, so important what you just
It
said.
is important. And it's where you have to watch a little bit, like strategies that can be really useful strategies, like thinking about a SMART goal where you box it in and contain it. That can actually be something to hide behind instead, it's achievable and it's measurable and it's specific and all the things it's supposed to be. But it can also be one of those small boxes that you end up hiding within because the fear of reaching into the unknown, the fear of stepping into your own magnificence drives you to safety.
My gosh, I hate SMART goals. Side note, I've told, like, I will never, I used to teach them in corporate. I'll never teach them again. Like,
Mhm.
I disagree with, there's
I think
elements,
they can
but
have a place as a small piece underneath a big umbrella goal where you need to move
Mhm.
something forward and you want to
Mhm.
measure that. I think they can have
Yeah.
a place, but I think you've got to get beyond, you've got to reach beyond in order to really look for the things that allow you to step into your magnificence.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay. So beautiful. So keep going. So you were talking
Yeah.
about getting out of this box, foundation
Yes.
of,
And
yes.
so those goals that you make when you're in that foundation of fear, really close the box and make it small. And
Mm,
so in order for us to tap that lid open and, look to the stars, look to the things that are going to help us, we need to think about reaching and climbing and growing and opening up to all the things that, scare us a little bit. And I think that that's part of, the figuring out. I think a big, gorgeous goal always contains an element that you don't know how you're going to get it done, whether it's a skill set, a financial gap, um, a knowledge gap, a gap of a connection. So you don't have the right people in your circle to help
mm,
you get there. There's always a missing ingredient when it comes to a big, gorgeous goal. And so I think that's part of what drives the fear. Like, how could I ever do that? How would I learn that? Who do I know? Like, I don't know the right people to help me with this. How would I finance it? How would I, like, it's always those pieces where and sometimes it just feels like, oh, too hard.
yeah. Yeah. How do you coach yourself through it when you are working on a big, gorgeous goal and that fear crops up? What do you do?
So often that's where I use people.
Mm,
So is it a mentor? Is it a paid advisor or a coach? Is it, I have a really amazing group of women that I call my privy council. And, is it workshopping some ideas with them, getting somebody to spend, an hour or two with me with a whiteboard, or just generally being with the whole group and, talking about an idea.
yeah. Mm,
And
mhm.
so that piece of it, like, it's for me, it's using people.
Using-
Um, that's my primary go-to. The second go-to I would have is to clear some time in my calendar and try and get out into nature or some other place where my mind can wander a little bit. I find that in order to really move things forward, I need some time and some space where it doesn't feel necessarily productive. I need to allow my mind to wander and think things through and mull things over in a way that I used to deny myself a lot because it felt so unproductive. And but I need that. I need that space. And then suddenly I can come from all of that swirl and crystallize something. And then I feel like I can move. And then I can move quite quickly, actually.
So much power in that. There's so much power in just having conscious awareness of where's my energy? Where's my mind? And this is something I said to myself today. I was like, okay, what are my intentions for today? My intentions for today are, and I use some Abraham Hicks type language. So someone could choose whatever they want, but I was like, I'm going to be in the vortex, or you could be like, I'm going to be tapped in. I'm going to be tuned in. I'm going to pay attention to my energy. I'm going to be conscious. And then I'm going to just get whatever else done I can get done from there. Because
Yeah.
ideas that come from outside of that place, it is the swirl. It
Yeah.
is the, I don't know. It doesn't help move you forward. And
Mhm.
I want to also just ask about one other thing you said. So you said getting past the fear, you use people.
Mhm.
I'm assuming, you tell me if you approach this differently, you use people who are at the level of either of the goal that you're looking to achieve, or they have the mindset of someone who wouldn't look at this and be like, "Oh, you should be in fear," right? Because I know
Mhm.
sometimes we could be like, oh, well, I've got this big decision to make. Let me go talk to let me go talk to my mom. Let me go talk to my brother. Let me talk to my
Yes.
best friend from high school. And it's the way I always look at it is, do they have the results you want? And if so, yes, lean into them. And if not, you're going to get feedback at their level of consciousness, which may not be what you want to
Yeah.
get. So is that how you approach it too?
Yes.
With the
Yes.
using
And
people?
in some ways, it's one of the things like that you have to get over as you continue to level up, because what happens, so I wrote a book and became an author, and I started circling in, I changed race courses. So, you pick a new horse for a new race course. And I was circling with all these people who were successful thought leaders, successful authors. And then, you're gaining the toehold and you're going to start to work your way up through that level. And you also have to have like a little bit of a mindset of not being intimidated by that. Because suddenly you've moved to, the bigger fish pond and you're the small little fish in there. And so, how do you find supporters within that new group that you're circulating in? And how do you kind of leverage that to help you feel more comfortable? And it is finding groups with people that are doing what you want to be doing.
Yeah.
And trying to, because that's when the voices in your head get really loud, right? Is when you feel small in a new group where you feel inexperienced and uncertain.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I know so many people listening, they're used to being top of the pack, whether it's leading their company, being top of the leaderboard in a sales role, and that can be our comfort zone. But there's no growth there. Right. So I love how you said it's like, let's get on a different horse. Let's go. That requires a level of humility and willingness to lay the ego aside and say, okay, this feels uncomfortable, but I'm willing to be new. I'm willing to be the brand new author in this group of established authors. And that's where the growth edge comes. Right.
Yeah.
What were I'd love if you could speak, Julie, to maybe just one or two of the commonalities amongst, I know you interviewed over a dozen successful entrepreneurs, right, with the book and talking to different women who had gone out and set and achieved these big, gorgeous goals. What were a couple of the key commonalities you found amongst them?
I found it really interesting because I thought I would get very different answers depending on how people, you get the like big visionary person filled with ideas. You get the person who's more of a builder who can take the ideas and actually make them live and breathe. Yeah. And so, when you have two people coming at something from completely different perspectives, you don't always expect the same answer. And the thing I found was that invariably they say it's systems, processes, and people that allow them to do big things. So one of the motifs that I use in the book is the iceberg motif, because, 10% of an iceberg sits above the water. That is the fantastic things we see that people do. 90% of it is hard work, and we don't see that. It's like social media, right? It's a highlight reel. So we're seeing the good things. And so you don't understand how people build things underneath them in order to sustain them. They have a scaffolding that they have built that is allowing them to reach these great heights. And it's systems, it's processes, and it's people.
Interesting. Is that so? Systems, processes, people, are those the three things that you really look at when you're coaching? Because you work with a number of clients where they're scaling from 7 to 8, right? So we can talk about that a little bit here too. And I know you coach a lot of different clients, but from what I understand, that's one of your sweet spots. Is that the biggest difference when going from 7 to 8 figures, or tell me how those things fit in that growth journey?
I think they are the biggest things because things happen, so you get to 7 and you have processes that are working, and you probably have some people that work for you. But to go to 8, the people part, the roles are going to get more specific. You're going to hire more. You're going to turn into a manager of people and less a doer. And the unfortunate reality is that some of the people who were with you from the earliest days may not survive that transition up into the kind of formalization and systemization your business is going to need to survive and thrive at 8 figures. So that's a hard path. And it's a hard path for some entrepreneurs who feel like people start businesses, women especially, I believe, start businesses because they see a need in the world. And so there's an endlessly fascinating list of people who have started businesses because of that. And that doesn't mean that I imagine being the boss lady and having a lot of people reporting to me. And so it's really like this big transition to, what does it really look like to be a CEO entrepreneur CEO, as opposed to, the person at 3 a.m. who stayed up late because we're trying to get something launched and, you're closing up the loose ends and that sort of thing. Like when you have an 8-figure business, you really want to try and not be in that position, because it means you don't have the right systems and processes in place.
How do you start to fill some of those gaps? And I know you work with clients, you do intensives and VIP days and longer containers to work with clients on that. But if someone they're saying, okay, I'm aware, like I have this vision, I want greater impact, I want greater growth. I love your point of, you don't want to be the one up at 3 a.m. fixing things.
Yeah.
If you are that person raising your hand, where do you start to even get aware of some of the gaps with systems and processes? Is it like, I know it, like I'll feel things intuitively in my business, like we got to change that, or we got to fix that.
Yeah.
Is there an assessment that we do? How do we start to get a handle on that?
Yeah, we work our way through an assessment. It's not super complicated. It takes, less than half an hour. And that is a good indicator for me of where the biggest opportunity areas are to focus first. Because I think it's one of those things like any closed system will have, if you have a bottleneck and you clear that bottleneck, you are inevitably going to create another bottleneck somewhere else, right? And so working on problems in your business is like that. It's not like you're going to ever have everything fixed, right? You're going to fix something and it's going to show another problem in a different part of the business, and you're going to work your way through that problem. And you may even come back around to the first problem that you fixed, where you've scaled up enough that now it's a problem again. Or some version of it that seems almost familiar. And so I think that taking that mindset of, okay, like this is how it works. Like we're not stagnant. The world's not stagnant. Our business is going to continue to grow. And so we're going to continue to have problems we need to solve. That is just the way of it. In fact, I always feel like if you ever really actually are sitting there thinking you know what you're doing, you've got a big change coming, and it's probably right around the corner, because that's entrepreneurship. It's constant learning and growing.
So true. Oh my gosh. I was listening to an interview with Tony Robbins the other day, and I don't listen to a lot of his stuff actually, but I for whatever reason, I was tuning into it, and he was talking about, I think he's got over 100 companies now, so many people reporting to him across the world. And he was like, at any given time, if I look at my phone, there's going to be a lot of things I could get worked up about, because there's going to be a lot of people talking about problems, doing things not the way I would do it, but that's part of growth and scaling, is you have to be okay with that. And it made me think about dropping perfectionism. So I want to speak for just a moment to how you've seen that play into your own growth, the entrepreneurs you coach. I know a lot of the women in our community who I work with in particular, they're not consciously aware of it, but they have a paradigm of perfectionism. And we've been taught that as women, especially to be safe in the world, you have to look a certain way, you have to present a certain way, you can't make mistakes, especially not with money. God forbid you make a mistake with money, and so we get caught up in this, probably a very small box of perfectionism, right? But to your point, there's always, when we're growing, there's always going to be things that feel like problems. So how did you notice perfectionism crop up in your journey, or did you not? But either way, how do we work around that? And how do we shift our mindset away from that? Because I think it's a very limiting belief system.
It is. I think perfectionism breeds a culture of control as well, potentially, right? Like you want everything to be perfect, so you hang on really tight and you want to control things. And that leads to things that are, less than good in terms of outcomes, because then you have micromanaging. Your team's not going to like that. You have, you become the block in the system to getting anything done, because everything's running through you. You are beyond capacity. You can't make that many decisions, all of those things. And so the only way to scale is to relinquish some of that control and some of that perfectionism. It's figuring out strategies for how to do it in a smart way that makes sense, and that you have the right amount of controls around, like, especially when you're letting go of like financial things. Let's say you build a finance team, you need to let go, and all of those kinds of things. That means, getting the right advice, having the right checkpoints, having the right monthly routines that you follow in order to ensure, because you don't want fraud in your business. That nobody wants that. And so you need the right controls in order to make sure it doesn't happen. But it means you also need to relinquish the work to the people who are experienced and who are going to do it well for you. And so I think things like that are so important, like delegating well so that your employee really understands what it is you're asking them to do, how you're going to check in about it, and what it is you expect to have upon the completion of the task. Nobody teaches us how to do that.
I was just going to say, what's your best tip for how to how do you teach people how to delegate? Because it's so, like stuff gets so gunked up in communication there. I've seen it in my communication too. I'm like, man, I didn't even talk about how we were going to make sure this was done well, or circling back. Cause I'll be so candid with everyone listening. Part of me, I just want to release stuff and be like, I'm moving on. I'm the very like visionary entrepreneur. I don't want to get stuck in the weeds. And that can create a lot of opportunities for things to be missed or just poor communication. So what's your strategy for delegating, Julie?
So my strategy is to outline the task, and depending on the size of the task, ask them to go and sort of frame up their solution to the task. And so I think there's a process in having them frame it up, because initially, they might come with a couple of options and ask you what you want to do. So that's still not delegation, because you're still the decision maker, right? So there's a first step, but then the next step is, how do they come up with those same ideas and make a recommendation to you? And then how do they come up with those same ideas and say, I chose this one, this is why, and here's how it's rolling out. Right. So there's like a journey, I think, and using a bit of a framework around checkpoints so that you can understand that you're on track, because there is seriously nothing worse as an employee than putting a project together and delivering it and feeling very proud of it and having it not be what you were asked to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So as a leader, you have to be very careful, because you don't want that scenario to turn up with your staff, especially if it turns up over and over and over again. It's demoralizing, and then you risk losing that person.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's such a great point. Yeah, I love that. So kind of working that ladder of progression to eventually getting your team so empowered to where they can come to you and say, here's what we did and here's how it's rolling out. And so really being in that mindset as well. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Share with us, Julie. This is so good. I'm like, gosh, we could go for hours here, because there's so many more places I want to talk to you, but I want to be mindful of time. So final tip, word of advice for someone who's wanting to scale from 7 to 8 figures. Is there anything I haven't asked you about that you think is important for someone to be conscious or cognizant of along that journey?
I think not to get discouraged, because it's a journey, and you will have a couple of resistance points at least in the journey, and figuring out how to, push through them, get around them, change your strategy a little bit. Like nothing is, a straight line when you're an entrepreneur, right? It's about setting up a great process for evaluation and reevaluation and continued recalibrating as you go through this journey. And putting people around you that can help to support you in the journey. Because one of the other things that happens is, you grow into this CEO that is leading a larger team and wants to feel like you're, looking more professional and not looking uncertain. We don't want to, be uncertain in front of our team. And so it's, putting the right people around you, the right framework to support you and lift you up and help you along that path. I think it's really important to build that in.
Beautiful. It's a team effort, right support, right people around you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Julie, tell everyone where they can go to connect with you. I think this is so powerful, and I think you're doing something really rare and unique and valuable in the world too. So if someone wants to learn more either about your book, Big Gorgeous Goals, or if they want to learn about coaching with you, working with you, how can they get connected?
You can find me at julieellisandco.com. And there's a form there you can fill out if you want to reach out to me. You can also find me on LinkedIn or Instagram. On Instagram, I'm the Julie Ellis.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And if you didn't mention LinkedIn, I was going to say, I know you do regular trainings and I think lunches and like learning
Yes.
experiences for people to come and connect. So I see a lot of that
Yeah.
on LinkedIn when I pop on and look at what you're doing. So I know there's a lot of great opportunities for education someone can get as well
Yeah.
if
I'd
they
love to see, I'd
want.
love to see people come out to our lunch and series.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. This was so
Thanks,
fun. I
Elise.
like I got to get my notebook out here and start writing this stuff down because this is gold. So, your journey is inspiring, and also I just so appreciate how you're using it to now help other people elevate and experience what it's like to set and achieve big, gorgeous goals. So, thank you so much for your time, Julie.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And to you, my listener, thank you so much for tuning in. Go connect with Julie. Again, I think both from reading her book and then also getting connected with what she's doing online. She is just a wealth of information and such a big thinker, which I love because that's what we're all about here in the community. So, with that, if you are ready to go deeper into your journey in She Sells World, you can head over to elisearcher.com to learn more about our coaching and programs designed to help you elevate your sales, step into a greater level of financial abundance, and truly transform into the person that you know you were meant to be. I hope you enjoyed this episode, this powerful conversation with Julie. I want to encourage you to go listen to another one of our podcasts right now for continued inspiration. And I will see you on our next episode. Bye for now.